Oh, I think that's off and running. Yes, it is. Okay. All right, man. So I'm going to count down from 3, and then we can press record at the same time. Is that cool?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1, record.
Got it.
Testing. Testing. 1, 2, 1, 2. Test, test, test.
I'm coming through. And you are coming through to me.
I like it.
Yeah. I use a Roadcaster.
Oh, nice.
So
I've been looking into
there's
that actually.
something there's something about the confidence of like being a physical machine that you push record on and like
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had like the dreaded like lost recording or
Oh,
anything
yeah.
like that.
Of
And
course.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's just something, I don't know, like inspiring confidence about using a physical machine to do the recording. I don't know what it is.
I get it, man. I mean, all these damn digital backups and everything, you're doing the right thing over there. But
Yeah.
yeah, me and my old co-host, we had like a 2-hour episode. This is like 5 years ago. It was great, man. Great conversation. We were so pumped. And then when I went over to check it, it had stopped recording at like 40 minutes.
Mhm.
So like an hour and a half, the conversation just like wasn't recorded.
Fucking deadly, man. That's
Yeah,
deadly.
it's happened to everyone, I'm sure. So
We had Dave and I, who I know you know Dave, my co-host,
yeah,
who I always call Jewish Dave, but David Rosen,
right.
because we've known each other since we were 18, freshmen in UNLV, and
Hmm.
in the dorm room there were like 3 Daves, and so I was DQ, he was Jewish Dave, and then we had Dirty Dave, so there was like but anyway, he and I, when we were doing the show, the first year that we were doing the show, we had this software that was just garbage, just terrible,
Uh-huh.
and we got to the point where over the course of a month we lost like 3 different recordings. One time it was his side,
Ugh,
another time it was my side, and it wasn't our fault. It was
the
it was not.
worst.
Yeah, and so yeah, that's when we kind of, he's a little bit more professional. He's a real audio engineer, like a real composer, a music composer,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah,
like a podcaster.
yeah. He's
So
he's told me that. Yeah, that's cool.
yeah,
Are
we
you
upgraded.
are you in Vegas now? I'm just curious.
No, I'm in Miami. We're bi-coastal. Like he's in Vegas and I'm in Miami, and we sort of we do everything virtual. We have a few live shows every now and then. He'll come here and we'll do a
Hmm.
live show, and I've gone there and done some live shows there.
That's cool, man.
Usually, yeah, it's a politics podcast, so like usually it's in the heat of election season. We'll get together during primaries, and
Yeah.
we'll make it be part of like some sort of activism, and give a platform for people to come like talk and stuff like that.
Well, I'll have you talk about that a little bit at the top of the recording too, just because you've never been on. So just to let everybody know. So,
Yeah,
all right, man. So, do you have any questions about? I mean, I assume you've listened before, but
yeah,
it's just a pretty casual top 5 show. So
right.
we'll just go back and forth, giving our fives all the way down to our number ones, and then at the end, I like to limit your honorable mentions to 5. So if you have
Yeah,
5, that's fine, but or
that's
less.
exactly what I did. I put together 5, and I'm just going to do them kind of like lightning round style.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, exactly. When
the,
we get to the end, yeah.
these are good too. Yeah, and then I know you also don't like to mention any potential entrance into the category
That's
until you
right.
get into the category.
That's
So
right. Yeah, I like the element of a surprise a little bit that way. So,
yeah,
and if
you
we
don't want
have
to step on somebody's like, oh well, that was my number 3 or
right,
something like that.
right,
Yeah,
and what I was going to say in relation to that too, Dave, is that if we have crossover, like if I mention one of yours, don't feel like you have to mix your list up or anything. We can have crossover. It's completely fine. So
okay, cool. Yeah,
you can either talk about it right then and be like, hey, that's on my list too, and this is why I love it, or you can wait till it comes around. It doesn't really matter. There's no real. Oh wow, really?
yeah. I'm an
Oh,
imp, a carry
okay,
imp. Yeah.
okay,
And
yeah.
I went to state for 1 year, and then
Uh,
before I transferred to UNLV.
okay, yeah. I work in Raleigh. I work actually really close to the campus there. So,
Yeah.
I don't know if this messed up my. Give me 1 minute, man, just because I want to see if what this did to my video.
Yeah.
Hang on. But I guess if it was going to happen, I'm glad it happened at the top there.
Do you have that like one like Wi-Fi fail a day? Like I used to have that
Yeah, yeah.
before they fixed up our network in my neighborhood. I used to have like
Oh, no question.
guarantee same time every day too. It would be like done.
All right, yeah, it says it's live still, so I guess it just kind of picked up where it left off. I guess I don't know. Okay, let's try that again, man. I'm sorry. So
No worries.
let me get back to my notes, and then we'll just do that again. All right, 5 seconds, and I'll come in and we'll get going. Okay. And you kept, by the way, you kept recording from the previous one, right? Okay.
Yep, I'm still going.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Two Peas on a Podcast. I'm so happy that you joined me again this week. Gerald here with you, of course. And another exciting episode this week. Extra exciting because I have a first-time guest on the show. I love when that happens. I love when other podcasters and entertainers reach out to me to come on the show. It's just awesome for me. I love it to hear these new voices on the show, and I've got a new one this week. His name is David. I didn't ask him, you go by Dave or you go by David? What do you prefer?
Usually David or DQ or even just Q. Like,
all right, well,
yeah, most people. If it's funny because like if people from my podcast are listening right now, they're going to be like, "Who the hell is David?" But yeah,
okay.
Q or DQ is fine.
So DQ, we'll stick with DQ or Q, I guess.
Yeah.
So many names, man. From the Bird Road podcast, which is a podcast that, truth be told, I was not super familiar with until recently. And I know your co-host on that show, Dave Rosen, and I've been on his show before, and he's been on this show before. Mm-hmm. So since you've never been on, man, and I think it's a really cool concept, I was actually listening to a couple episodes today because I knew I was going to have you on. It gets pretty weighty. It's pretty deep conversation over there you guys dive into every week, which I actually used to do on this show. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
The first year of my show, we were a current events show. So talk a little bit about what you do, man, and tell people a little bit about Bird Road.
Yeah, so Bird Road is based off of it's eponymous to the sort of main street here that runs through the middle, the heart of Miami. I'm in Miami. My co-host is in Las Vegas. It's a politics show where we were initially when we sort of dreamed the show up, we wanted to explore progressive politics in the context of purple states like ours, Florida and Nevada. Mm-hmm. That whole framing has kind of changed over the years. Now we kind of focus on like we focus on parts of like media narratives and communication that don't really add up, and like what the truth and reality of an issue is versus the way that it's presented in media. Mm-hmm. We talk about the reasons behind that. We interview a lot of people who don't usually have platforms, people who are a little further to the left in the political spectrum, and you don't really hear their voices on places like MSNBC or CNN. So yeah, that's the show. It's been on about 3.5 years and kind of just chugging along, man.
I'm just curious, Two Peas is not that anymore, but like I said, the first year, me and my initial co-host, his name's Andy, and we did, basically just like a current event show, and it did often, kind of drift off into politics and stuff like that, especially during the Trump years and everything, because we actually started our podcast in 2016 because Trump won. Like we were at work just kind of like really in shock. Just kind of discussing how that was able to happen. And we were like, you know what, let's just record this. And that's kind of how Two Peas was born. So, I mean, I'm just curious because it did really bog me down after a period of time where it just kind of got to be so much. It was just such an emotional, like...
It's a drain, man.
Yeah,
it takes a toll.
So I was going to ask how you deal with that.
I have an operating theory about, again, this goes back to sort of what we try to do, which is, examine, media narratives and the information that gets presented to you and why it's being presented to you that way. And I kind of have this operating theory that's the point. The point is to do exactly what happened to you. Mm-hmm. But that is the end goal, to have people who are, earnestly interested in being civically engaged in their community, getting these crushing, depressing national messages dropped on them, and eventually kind of losing hope and saying like, damn, man, this is just a buzzkill. And mm-hmm. frankly, it feels too big to get your arms around. And yeah, like we struggle with that a lot. I'll say that from our perspective, what we try to do when we feel that way is go a little smaller, mm-hmm. find somebody who's working on something positive and encouraging or important on a local level. We try to elevate a lot of local voices, people who you don't find on like, bigger media outlets. And when we do that, it kind of eases that anxiety that we all have from just watching our Twitter feed or watching the news. It can be too much, man. And if you let it be, especially these days, you're talking about 4 or 5 years ago when Trump was elected.
Yeah.
I mean, these days, holy cow, man! It can be enough to really, it can be
Yeah.
enough to really kick your ass.
Yeah, real life can be a lot more scary and sad and all those things, but it can be happy too. And you guys are you're doing good stuff over there, man. And I know what goes
Thanks,
into
man.
that, where you have to, because you really have to stay on top of it, you know.
Yeah,
And that's another thing that really, weighed me down in the podcasting world as an indie podcaster. Is that obviously I have a real job and a family and everything, so I can't,
no,
spend
same.
8 or 10 hours a day watching MSNBC and doing research. So it got to be a lot on the front end, and then you're recording, and then you're editing. So I know what goes into it, man. So I just wanted to commend you. I was listening to a couple episodes today,
I appreciate that.
and anybody that follows the news or politics, make sure you check David and Jewish Dave. Is that what you're calling
Yeah,
him?
Jewish Dave. Yeah, David
Jewish Dave?
Rosen is look. Hey, if you're out there, if you're a Two Ps listener out there, and you ever interact with David Rosen,
Yeah,
make sure on social media, make sure you call him Jewish Dave.
Jewish
Just,
Dave. I'm sure he loves
just
it.
call him. He loves it. It's his
Yeah,
favorite.
it's the
His favorite
best.
shit.
It's the
It's
best.
the best.
So Bird Road Pod, DQ from Bird Road Pod. That's what we're going to go with tonight, I think. Let me make a note of that so I don't forget that later.
Thanks.
I got to remember those letters, DQ. Dairy Queen, I should be able to remember that.
Yeah,
DQ.
come on.
Yeah,
This is a national brand.
I love
I'm
DQ.
drafting off of the multi-million-dollar advertising budget and brand
right.
awareness budget of Dairy Queen.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Softy freeze, man. All right, so, obviously a lot less in terms of like the weight, right? Because we're just doing a fun top 5 show. So a little something different for you, which might be cool too, DQ.
Hell
so,
yeah.
But you came up with a few topics for me, and you emailed me a couple weeks ago, and I said, "Yeah, man, let's do it." You came on the reference of Jewish Dave, who I love. He's been on the show a couple times, and I've been on his show. He's a great dude. So I said, "Yeah, man, let's do it." Now, this is the one we kind of settled on. Why don't you tell all the listeners what we are counting down this evening?
Yeah, so I had a little bit of an ulterior motive after hearing a couple of your shows, and the topic that we're going to go into today is the top 5 short-lived, canceled before their time TV shows.
Yeah.
And I feel like you and a lot of the guests that you bring on have a very savvy understanding of this industry, like the larger Hollywood culture-making industry.
Mm-hmm.
And what I wanted to do that I thought might be interesting to hear from your perspective is explore this new formula that's out there that I don't think any of us know what the actual formula is, which is how is a thing defined as successful or not successful these days? How is it something you cancel versus something that you don't, that you keep going? And it has become such a many variable thing that it's you look at some of these like your last episode I know was about Netflix, the top 5 a rehash of, or not a rehash but an update of your top 5 Netflix shows. And I think about that tranche of shows that Netflix just canceled. Some of them were great and people really loved and really enjoyed, but there's some algorithm somewhere saying,
exactly.
no. Yeah, exactly. That show doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And it's such a mysterious thing. And I'd love to hear your take on it and like what makes things successful and not cancelable anymore.
I mean, I'm with you, man, where it's kind of like a mystery because, I mean, so many things are streaming now. And so many things are just kind of like on demand. I can remember. How old are you, DQ?
40.
Yeah, so I'm
40, baby.
So I'm 45. So we're roughly in the same range there. But I can remember a time where you got 3 or 4 channels, and you had to watch what was on, and that was it. And now it's like you have literally a million things that you can just click a button and watch whenever you want, not necessarily at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday night. So. It is kind of strange. The numbers play into that and the downloads they get and that kind of stuff. So I really don't know. But I'm kind of part of the problem too because I kind of like it because, with the podcast and YouTube and my family and work and like, who has time to be on the couch at a certain time these days? Which is sad. It's sad to say, but I mean, the times we live in are not the 80s or 90s. I mean, right?
Right. Yeah, it's funny because I think about this other podcast that I listen to that is a big sort of mainstream corporate podcast that is pretty well respected. It's a culture show. It's based in LA, has probably hundreds of thousands of listeners. And this podcast has, on occasion, the 2 hosts have decided like, oh, we like this show.
Yeah.
And this show that's struggling to get 1 million viewers on HBO, right? And they'll, with their power of hundreds of thousands of listeners, elevate that show.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's not even about ratings anymore. It's about, oh, this show is now part of a cultural conversation, and
Right.
maybe it only has 1.2 million people watching it, but it's on the front page of the Ringer every week, and I guess we gotta keep this show going. Sure enough, those shows very often get renewed, and I just think that that's such a an esoteric way to it's such a confusing, convoluted way to run this enormous business. It's like, oh, well, maybe this thing's not making money, but people are paying attention to it and talking about it.
Right.
And then contrast that with shows that don't pierce that sort of prestige veil, but are watched by tens of millions of people and never go off the air.
Yeah, I guess it's similar to movies in that respect too, where you have the box office draw, the money that it's making for the studios, but then you have these little indie films that the critics and the awards circuit love, you know.
Yeah.
And it's similar in that way, where it's like it's not making money, but people are talking about it and it's winning awards, you know. So
Yep.
it still kind of gets the prestige in that way. I don't know.
Right.
It is a strange time we live in, DQ. It's a fucking weird time, you know. Well, I'm not gonna.
I will say this though, my last little bit of like before, as we sort of do some throat clearing before we start this,
Mhm.
I will say in doing this, I realized that all of my favorite shows get canceled.
Yeah.
All of them. You either, and I thought of like the Dark Knight. I think it was from the Dark Knight, like some version of it where it's like you either get canceled or you live long enough to become dog shit. And
That's right.
and it's either that or It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, which will never probably be canceled. That show's been on for 30 years. And
I know. I love that show too, by the way. But yeah. Well, when you were coming up with your list, man, for our short-lived TV shows, now we're in the same age brackets. I mean, I'm 5 years older than you, but that's not too far off. I was shocked personally when I was making my list. All of my shows, with the exception of one of them, is within the last 20 years, which was kind of crazy to me because I watched a ton of TV in the 80s and 90s. What about your list without giving away any titles? You know, when you were coming up with it, was it easy for you to make? Like you said, you had a ton that got canceled too early. So how was it kind of narrowing down this list for you?
I have one that is in our sort of appended also rans section later at the end. That is from our childhood. That will be a name that you probably remember as being a little kid, in your room watching it. But almost everything else is in the last 14 years. I would say. In the last, from 2007 forward.
Pretty modern.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, pretty modern. And I'll tell you the reason why is, I don't know about you, but like when I was a teenager and when I was in my, out and about, being on the town, going out every weekend, 20s, I didn't really watch a lot of TV. And then also prestige TV didn't really hit until we were like around 30-ish. Like it wasn't like, ooh, Sunday night appointment viewing for HBO when I was 23. There was nothing I was interested in sitting down and watching TV. Movies, that's a different topic, but yeah.
And I think it speaks to the time, too, that we were talking about earlier. Because as we get further and further along in our calendar here, we're in 2021, shows are just typically more short-lived than they used to be. I feel like more shows get canceled as we get closer to where we are in the timeline, if that makes sense. I think in the 80s and 90s when you had the Nielsen ratings and you had, 3 basically channels competing against each other, you could have a show run for 10 years and it was like, no big deal because every station had that. But now it's like you gotta, if you're not getting the eyeballs, you're off, you're done. It's a very short leash that these shows are on these days, I feel like. So
well, think about it this way. Like, you never heard about this, which has become a very popular trope these days when you talk to showrunners or you hear from them. This trope that is a complete invention of, I would say, like the last 15 years, where you'll hear a David Weiner or somebody like that say, "Oh, the show went 4 seasons and it ran its course. That's what we wanted. We wanted to do 4 seasons."
Yeah.
Nobody in the
That's
80s
true.
ever said that. They were like, "No, we want another season and another one after that. We don't care. We'll come up with more story. We don't care."
I want it to run literally forever.
Forever.
So yeah, but that's not the case these days. They write the arc in 4 or 5 years, they're out of there. So I agree with you, man. All right, I'll tell you what, let's get into it, brother. So we're going to do our top 5 short-lived television shows. David from Bird Road Podcast is here. I'm going to let you go first, man. What's your number 5?
So my number 5 is a show that was canceled because nobody saw it. And I will be shocked if you or any of your listeners or watchers saw it.
Wow.
It was The Bridge on FX. It was an hour-long drama. It ran from 2013 to 2014. It had 2 seasons. It was created by Meredith Stein and Elwood Reed. It starred Damian Bashir and Diane Kruger. It was this brilliant. First of all, have you heard of this show or no?
No,
Is this something new on your radar?
I was
Okay.
about to Google it actually as you were talking, but go ahead.
Okay, so the Bridge was this show that seemed like it was such a specifically made show for a place and a moment. It was about the animating action. The first scene of the show is a dead body is found on a bridge in between Juarez and El Paso, Texas, right? And the body is directly on the actual line of demarcation. So this Chihuahua State Police officer, Damian Bashir, who's played by Damian Bashir, has to work with a member of El Paso's homicide team, who's Diane Kruger, who most people probably remember from Inglourious Bastards.
Right.
And they have to form this uneasy alliance. He's somewhat corrupted, but it's presented in this light where you understand that to work in law enforcement in Mexico, you kind of have to be a little bit corrupted. And he's working alongside of this, blonde gringa American woman who is also has undiagnosed Asperger's and has this difficulty dealing with people on an interpersonal level, but is an incredible detective. And I'll tell you, man, this is people give me shit when I say this, and I haven't said this on podcasts before. This show, in its 2 seasons, I'll take the 2 seasons of this show over the 3 seasons of True Detective. And
wow.
I say that because they're very similar in tone.
Okay,
they're very similar in feel and vibe. And True Detective was what, one incredible season, an awful season, and a pretty good season.
Right,
This is two really, really, really good seasons of television.
What was the year on this again? What was the year on it?
2013 to 2014.
So True Detective came after this, right? Yeah, I think.
Yeah. I'll never forget
okay.
when my daughter was born in 2013. True Detective was on, and I would spend nights watching it with her falling asleep on me, and so that's why I'll always remember that True Detective was out at the same time. Now here's the thing about The Bridge. What's so fascinating about this show is that, like I said earlier, it's this unique moment. It's like, what else could be like that dynamic in between Texas and Mexico and Chihuahua State, and that all of the loaded context of U.S. and Mexico relations, and the way that these are 2 cities that are generally about the same size, but in one they get about 6 or 7 homicides a year, and then in the other one they get thousands.
Yeah.
Right? So wow, that's super original. No, this show is a remake. And it originally took place on the Swedish and Danish border. So
wow,
they took this, I guess, I don't know much about Swedish Danish geopolitics or whatever, but they took this this dynamic and they exported it to the US audience, and they did it incredibly. Yeah, it was a great show.
Well,
season 2 has a great guest appearance by a guest arc by Matthew Lillard, who I haven't seen in forever.
So. Stu from Scream, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if you know, I'm a huge fan of that. Okay, all right. Wow, I don't know why I don't know this, but okay, The Bridge, that was on FX, you said, right?
That's right.
All right, that's your number 5. It sounds like a bit of a crime drama. Is that how you would categorize that?
That's exactly what it is, a crime drama. Yeah, a very hard-boiled neo-noir style crime drama.
Okay, well, guess what? My number 5 is a crime drama, which I didn't expect us to cross over on genres right away. But this is a show that aired initially in 2007, and it was on one of the primetime networks. It was on NBC. And I just remember I watched this with my grandmother at the time because I was staying with her for a couple years when this show aired. It ran for 2 seasons, and we freaking loved this show, man. We were like, this was one of those shows where we were on the couch at 9 p.m. every, I don't know, whatever it was, Thursday night or whatever, watching a show called Life. Have you ever heard of a show called Life? It's a cop drama. It stars.
When I think of Life, what I think of is the Eddie Murphy
and Martin Lawrence. Yeah.
No, I haven't heard of this show.
So a lot of people hadn't, but it stars Damian Lewis, the redheaded actor that was in Homeland. Do you know him?
Sure.
And,
love Damian Lewis.
I can't remember the Showtime show that he's on currently, but
I love that you went to Homeland and not Billions. That's a good
Billions. That's the one I was thinking of. Billions. I was thinking of Billions. I just couldn't think of the title. Well, okay. So here's what it says on the description online. Here it says, after serving time for 12 years for a crime that he didn't commit, Detective Charlie Cruz returns to his job at the LAPD, and he basically, so the show takes on there him trying to solve the crime of who committed the murders because it wasn't him. So
Mhm.
he gets off because of DNA evidence. He was supposed to serve life in prison, but he got out after
Okay.
12 years because of DNA evidence that came
DNA
to light.
evidence.
But the public still thinks he's guilty. Like, they still kind of like think he's shady, and they don't think that he should have been let out of jail and everything. So it takes on this whole thing where he's like doing his normal police detective work, but in the background, in his free time, so to speak, he's trying to solve the mystery of who actually committed the murders that he was accused of.
Hmm.
So that's the show, and it only ran for 2 seasons. I want to say maybe like 30 episodes total, maybe.
Hmm.
But I love this show, man. It's such a cool, and it's actually on Peacock, because they have the
Okay.
streaming service now, so you can actually stream it. But it's a show called Life that originally aired in '07. That's my number
So
five.
let me ask you, did they was the and this is probably a question that we should maybe bake into every one of our submissions.
Hmm.
Was there a satisfying ending, or was
No,
it a cliffhanger that never got resolved?
nope, it got canceled.
Same thing with The Bridge, by the way. Just going back one, I should mention it got canceled, and the way that it ended in the second season, just like it sounds like with Life, it was like,
Yep.
what the hell's gonna happen next? And you never find out.
It got canceled too soon because we weren't able to find out who the true killers were. I mean, he had this whole like room in his house, and by the way, he got a huge settlement, for going to prison unlawfully.
Mhm.
So he got a huge settlement. So he had like a mansion, and there was like nothing in it. Like he had no furniture. Like he just had like a
Yeah.
fridge and like a desk, and but he just has this huge house or whatever. And Adam Arkin played his cellmate in prison who
Okay.
got released. He was in prison for like tax evasion. So anyway, the two of them have this room in the back of his mansion that he has all these like newspaper clippings and like different like theories and stuff where he's trying to solve the crime. So each episode kind of points to a different like link to his, ultimate theory, and we're getting closer and closer and closer to connecting the dots, and then the show just ended. So
Mhm.
it was really unfulfilling in that way too, which kind of sucks. My memory is a little hazy on the end of it, but I just know that it didn't get resolved, which kind of bummed me and my grandmother out at the time. So
Oh
yeah,
man.
yeah. So
Yeah,
life,
did you pop on any of these to like try to refresh yourself? Because I spent maybe about an hour on like popping on a few of these shows that I haven't seen in a long time.
I didn't, but I have a cool anecdote for what my number one ended up being, which I
Oh,
think
okay.
I
Okay.
think it probably would have been my number one anyway. But I'll explain when I get there. But that's the only one that would be yes to your an answer to your question there.
Hmm.
All right, so you had The Bridge at number five, a show that I had not heard of. What about your number four, man?
Number four might be a show that you've heard of. It did generate a lot of buzz at the time. This was in the moment, 2011 through 2012. It only ran for 2 seasons, and it was in the moment, if you remember, where every network, all of particularly the premium and non-basic cable networks, were trying to like take a home run swing and have their Mad Men or their Sopranos, their like prestige, like this is a serious and important show that you should be paying attention to.
Hmm.
Whereas I think a few years later, what started happening is you saw people start trying to subvert that and be like, oh yeah, but what if Mad Men was like, silly, or what if Sopranos was a half-hour comedy?
Hmm.
But this was still in that moment where everything was, capital S serious. And this is a Stars show that I absolutely loved, and it was for me appointment viewing. It was called Boss. Now, I don't know if you ever heard of Boss. Boss was created by Farhad Sarfina, and it starred Kelsey Grammer, Connie Nielsen, Jonathan Groff, Ti was in it.
This sounds
Um,
super familiar, but
Let
I
me
don't.
refresh your memory, see if because it's a very unique premise. It's a really unique premise.
Uh-huh.
Kelsey Grammer basically plays like, I would say, one of the greatest TV villains of all time. He's just this menacing, swaggering, evil creature.
Wow.
His name is Tom Kane. He's a long-serving mayor of Chicago. He's basically a send-up of Richard Daley, the real-life long-serving mayor of Chicago. He's corrupt, conniving, Machiavellian. He's always 5 steps ahead of everybody. It's like, I would say, imagine the kind of cunning and ruthlessness that it would take for you to rise up to become mayor of the machine politics of Chicago.
Hmm.
And I think usually a lot of times they'll show things like that. They'll show people like that, or they'll portray characters like that on TV and movies, and they'll be a little like doddering or kind of dipshits. But those people aren't dipshits generally. To be able to get to a position like that, you have to be like I said before, Machiavelli. We meet him in the pilot, and the animating action of this show is that he's been diagnosed as the sitting mayor of Chicago with Lewy body dementia. And the diagnosis, he chooses to keep it secret, just out of like pride and hubris.
Right.
And the conflict is that if you're mayor of Chicago, that's one of the most consequential positions in the country. It's an incredibly
Sure.
powerful position. It's more powerful. They actually have a whole story arc about how he's more powerful than the governor of Illinois, and the governor of Illinois has to, seek his approval for anything that she wants to do.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's an incredible show. It was clear out the box and let Kelsey Grammer just eat the scenery, just chew it to pieces.
Mhm.
And he's like, the character he played, I loved so much because he was just purely evil. He was like a Tony Soprano
Mhm.
character where like they really try to get you to care about him, and they get 90% of the way there, and he does something just another irredeemably evil thing, and you're like, no, fuck this guy. But
Wow.
it's like if Tony Soprano, the joke with Tony Soprano and the Soprano, I don't know how big of a Sopranos fan you were or not,
Big
but
fan.
like, okay, so you remember the way they set up Tony, and I always loved this about that show, is that he was smart. He was the smartest guy in Newark,
Sure.
which was like, okay, that's it. But he was like, it's like, who fucking cares that you're the smartest guy in Newark?
Right.
This character is basically, what if Tony Soprano had 50 more IQ points, 100,000 people on his payroll, and a $10 billion budget?
I got you.
And that's what he's an organized. He's a mobster by any definition of the word, just like any mayor of Chicago basically has to be.
Sure.
Incredible show. Yeah, again, another one that ends on a cliffhanger.
Of course,
because it was canceled after its second season. Yeah.
Of course, boss. Kelsey Grammer doing big things there. Wow. Okay, so
Yeah.
two that I have not seen, although I looked up Boss when you were talking, and I definitely remember seeing like the promotional stuff and trailers and stuff like that. So
They put money behind it. The first
Yeah.
season, they like really marketed it.
yeah, so I know of that one at least. All right, so I got to run on comedies coming up here, man. So my number 4 is one of my favorite like sitcoms of the last 20 years, easily. Let's see if I have the year. Yeah, so it premiered in 2013. Oh no, I'm sorry, it ended in 2013. It premiered in 2011. It's a show called Happy Endings. You know of Happy
Oh.
Endings?
Great show. Yes,
Oh,
I love
so-
happy endings. Yeah.
So good, man.
Yeah.
Alicia Cuthbert, who I'm in love with, was on that
Mhm.
show. She was in a movie a few years prior called The Girl Next Door, which is one of my favorite
Right.
comedies.
Great
Damon,
movie too.
yeah, it's a good movie. Damon Wayans Jr., who I don't know if it's just me, but he is so hilarious to me. Like, he just cracks me up so much. He looks exactly like his father, too, so there's a little bit of nostalgia there.
It trips me out when I see him, like when my wife is watching something on Netflix and I see him and I'm like, this looks like a very new show with like a 20-year-old Damon Wayans. How am I
Right.
watching this right now?
Right,
It's so
right.
weird. Yeah.
And then we got introduced to Adam Pally on this show. He's gone on to do great things. But I love Happy Endings. I mean, it just really takes that Friends formula that had kind of been worn out on that show and was kind of tired at the time, and just kind of rejuvenated it, made it a little more hip. You know, it kind of fit with the times a little bit better. And it had a really cool premise. You know, a lot of different outlets said that it was one of the worst television decisions in history when they canceled it as early as they did after 3 seasons, because it was just adored, and it was like kind of in that bridge where like people my age dug it, and then people that were like in college probably dug it. So it kind of like fit different age brackets too, demographic wise. But it was just short lived, and it just kind of the ratings tailed off on it, and they decided to cancel it after 3 seasons. But I actually rewatched some of this recently just for the hell of it. It was on Hulu, and I was just like checking it out. It holds up, man. I mean, there's a lot of great characters on this show that really bounce off each other really well. So, you know, if you're a fan of like that Friends kind of sitcom, you know, rom-com story arc, I think Happy Endings is, in my opinion, better, which might be a hot take. I don't know. But I'm not a huge Friends fan either, so I guess that's not going to surprise anyone. But Happy Endings, my number 4. Did you watch this when it aired initially?
Not when it aired initially. I caught up on it. My wife discovered it on Netflix, and
Cool.
it was one of those like come out after putting the kid to sleep. She's already like 2 episodes deep. We just kind of sink into the couch and watch it with her.
Yeah.
What do you think about this as another? We talk about like operating theories, things that we don't really have like full evidence of, but like kind of suspect.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's something to the idea that when they went away from the 2-camera in-studio audience, which is, you know, famously cost-effective way to film a sitcom, and they went to the single-camera scripted, do you think that a show like Happy Endings suffered, where maybe if it had that lower cost point of being filmed in front of a live studio audience and it was like a little bit more cost effective to film, it might have lasted a few more years? And I also think of shows like New Girl when I think of this too.
Right. Yeah. There's a ton of them. Yeah. I mean, there's an argument that could be made for that. I guess we don't really know because some of them are really successful and last
Yeah.
forever. But I don't know. I mean, for me, I think we were mentioning Friends, which is an obvious comparison for this particular show. But with that live studio audience thing, it kind of gotten a little tired. I feel like I feel like
Yeah,
it
it
was a
feels weird to
little.
watch that now. Yeah.
Yeah, like because even my daughter, who's going to be 20 this year, when I watch like Seinfeld reruns, I mean, she'll laugh at some of the jokes and stuff, but she'll be like, "That's so cheesy. Why are people?" In other words, it's weird because like it's normal to us, like if we're
Yeah.
watching Cheers or like whatever, but I don't know. It's just like people of a certain generation, when it gets
It's
past a
yeah.
certain year, they just don't even realize like, oh, people like went and watched this. Like, why are they laughing?
It's anachronistic. It's something
Yeah.
that people who are younger, your daughter's age, look and they're like, why is that even happening? Why would there be a bunch of people laughing?
Right. It's almost like
Yeah.
it's like not cool to do or something,
Well,
and
they
like,
removed, somebody edited out, I forget, I think it might have been like Big Bang Theory or something like that, where they edited out the laugh track to show
uh
you how absurd it is that people would be laughing at the jokes. Because when you take out the laugh track, it's like they take out the Pavlovian signifier that you're supposed to think that that's funny, and then all of a sudden it's just the joke left on its own two legs.
right, like
And a lot of
awkward
times,
silence. Right.
yeah, exactly, like
Yeah.
awkward silence, and they kind of look at each other and wait for the moment to pass. It's so
Yeah.
weird when you think about that. That's how we were raised, though, watching shows like that.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I guess that's a great argument you bring up, and I guess maybe that's for another time because as I'm sitting here thinking about it, when you mention it, I mean, I really do like both types of filming. Like, I do like both types of shows, but I
Yeah.
guess if I had to, I'd probably go this route with a single camera.
Yeah.
It just seems a little more like real life, I guess.
Yeah, I agree.
You know what I mean? All right, so
Yeah.
that's my number 4, Happy Endings. You had Boss at your number 4. What do you got at number 3?
So at number 3, I'm going into the world of streaming, and this was actually the first, I think, one of the first couple of streaming offerings, original content offerings that this platform, the platform being Amazon Video, Amazon Prime Video, put out. This is a black comedy and a spy thriller. I think if you know what this show is, you probably didn't watch this show, and you probably have the wrong idea about what this show is.
Hmm.
It lasted for 2 seasons. There's a little show called Patriot, and
Oh, I don't know this one.
this is one of my all-time favorite things that
Patriot.
exists.
Okay.
Yes, Patriot.
What's it
It was
about?
created by it was created by a guy named Stephen Conrad. It was basically it starred Michael Dorman and Terry O'Quinn and a bunch of people whose faces you know if you watch it. So the log line for Patriot is basically: to prevent Iran from going nuclear, intelligence officer John Tavner must forego all safety nets and assume a perilous, non-official knock cover of a mid-level employee at a Milwaukee industrial piping firm. This show mostly doesn't happen in Milwaukee or in Iran. It actually happens in Luxembourg. It is
Hmm.
first, I just want to like acknowledge that if you ever were a Kurtwood Smith fan, who's the dad from that '70s show,
70 show, right?
yeah, or a Terry O'Quinn fan who was I believe he was John Locke on Lost. Those two are in this show, and they have a number of scenes together that are some of the best things ever filmed. They're incredible. Those two playing off each other. But this show is not at all what it sounds like by me reading that log line to you.
Okay.
This show is an exploration of male friendship and male intimacy, and a thing that you don't really see explored on television or in movies at all. A thing where you actually become friends with a guy, and like you
Mhm.
you like get to know each other, and you have misunderstandings about who you are when you first meet, and sort of learning to have empathy about like, oh, I did the character, the main character who's played by Michael Dorman, John Tavner, who also has to go by other aliases. He's thought to be sort of an incompetent shit at his job, but it's not really his job. He's basically a knock undercover agent, and he sucks at pipe fitting. He sucks at doing that job,
Yeah.
and he takes a lot of heat for it. And it's just like this really quiet. It's almost like if David Lynch had directed Homeland. It's like
Wow. Okay.
It's something that you can't really explain.
You hooked me on that one. You
Yeah,
got me on that.
I would say. And the other thing I want to mention about it because I don't want to spoil too much if people want to go watch it. It's still on Amazon. Again, it's canceled. It has a, it
Yeah.
has a cliffhanger. It's not going to be a satisfying
Ugh.
cliffhanger for you. But the second season does this thing, almost a whole season long arc where they do probably the best visual representation I've ever seen in my life of extended mental and physical exhaustion. I've never seen that innovative or interesting of a portrayal of somebody who's pushed to their breaking point and can barely keep their eyes open and whose body is falling apart. And it's like maddening, and it gives you that like feeling inside where you're like, God damn it, I wish this guy would just lay down and rest. But he can't. And the filmmaking's incredible. Stephen Conrad also did a show called Perpetual Grace LTD, which nobody watched. Not a single person on the planet except me watched, and on Epix, on a channel called Epix.
Oh, Epix! So, I remember that. Yeah,
yeah. So it's and he's an incredible writer, Stephen Conrad. But yeah, it's just it's I don't know if you're a big Ted Lasso fan or not.
Oh yeah, I like Ted Lasso for sure.
It has a lot of that kind of vibe, like that feeling of like it's earnest. It's not ironic. It's not acerbic. It's very like it's very, the feelings that people feel are represented and expressed and acknowledged by the other people, and it's great. I don't know. If you want to learn how to be friends with dudes, watch Patriot.
Maybe I should then. Yeah, Patriot. That sounds good, man. You got 3 here that I'm thinking about adding to the queue, man. So far so good. That's another one that I had not even heard of. I hadn't even heard of Patriot. So
Patriot got buried. About that. It fell apart. It came out at the same time as Man in the High Castle, and Man in the High Castle got all of the marketing and promotional budget at Amazon in that same window.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it was kind of doomed from the start.
Yeah, sometimes it's tough on the front end with that stuff, So Patriots, your number 3. My number 3 was actually mentioned on a recent episode, and it hadn't come up before that, and here it is coming up twice, basically in like a 2-week period. But I love this show so much, and it just recently got canceled, which super bummed me out. But it's a show on Netflix called Santa Clarita Diet.
Yeah, I have to watch this. I have it queued. And I just haven't watched it yet. Yeah.
So good because it's such a great blend. It's a horror comedy show. I'm a huge horror fan, which you may or may not know, but that's my favorite genre of film, typically speaking. And this is a show that's very horrific. It's a zombie story, basically. Drew Barrymore portrays the undead. And, of course, Drew Barrymore has a horror lineage with Scream, which we mentioned earlier, and Firestarter and some other stuff. So I just think that's an awesome callback too, that they chose to cast her. And then Timothy Olyphant plays her husband. They're these real estate agents in the suburbs, in California. And Timothy Olyphant from Scream 2, by the way, so he also has a Scream connection.
Timothy Olyphant is one of those actors who just refuses to miss. He never misses.
No, he's just
everything he thinks to do is great.
I was gonna say one of the coolest. He's got to be one of the coolest dudes like on Earth. I mean, he's just so cool. Absolutely. And in this show was cool. Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah. But this show is cool too because it showed a different side of him where he's playing like the suburban dad, and he's dropping dad jokes and like, dressing with the khakis, and like it was just a different vibe for him, but he was still so cool in it. And the dynamic between him and Drew Barrymore was awesome, and they were the draw, right? But I also love the kids on this show, which I typically hate kid actors. But there was a couple young teen actors on this show. They were like next door neighbors, their daughter, the 2 main characters' daughter, and then next door the son. And they kind of had like a little high school romance going on, but he was in on her secret of being a flesh eater, basically. So, he's like, this young kid's like, oh my God, a zombie lives next door to me. And he knows all about zombies. He plays the video games and knows he's a horror fiend just like me, So that was a really cool element built into the show too. But it's basically just like, a standard sitcom, like, a married couple in the suburbs. But what if one of them was a zombie? Was undead and had to like eat humans, It's just like such a funny premise to me. And it also kind of plays to my horror love as well. But you said you hadn't seen this, right?
I haven't. I'm going to watch this show.
Yeah, check it out.
What blows my mind about this show is that this is a show that actually had, I always like kind of invoke this phrase, cultural conversation, which is like where you go into work and people are talking about a thing, right? And it's rare. I mean, like maybe 1% of shows get that, right?
Right.
Where there's some significant put. This was a show that had that. I
Yeah.
remember people were talking about this show. There were articles being written about this show.
Yeah.
It had its moment in the sun, and it was a moment in the sun when Netflix was signing fat checks to almost anybody
Yeah.
for things that nobody was watching. And here's something where there actually are, by all accounts, because it's so sort of opaque how Netflix's ratings work, but by all accounts a lot of people were watching this. And it goes back to our initial conversation when we just started up. I'm like, how did they make that decision
I
to
know.
cut this show? And I
Yeah.
haven't watched it yet, but everybody whose opinion I respect thinks it's great.
Yeah.
And so
was
I'm
just-
sure it was.
It was just canceled officially in 2019, so it's pretty recent, and it premiered in 2017. So it only was around for a couple years, but obviously it's still on Netflix. So I say check it out if you're into that kind of thing. I love Drew Barrymore. I love horror, so I was all about it, and it was really funny too. It was really funny. So Santa Clarita Diet, and we are up to our runner-ups. What do you got at number 2 over there, DQ?
My runner-up is again, we're firmly in the territory of things that are some of my favorite things in my entire life, right?
Oh,
And
all right.
this is something that came along at a moment when I personally really needed this show. And I joke around, I fuck around, I make fun of these things a lot, and I joke about this kind of stuff a lot, but you'll never hear me usually be this earnest about something being transformative and something that I recommend that every single person should watch. This is a show that was on AMC. It ran for 2 seasons. It was an hour-long drama, comedy, sort of absurdist comedy type thing. It was called Lodge 49. And Lodge 49 was created by Jim Gavin. It was executive produced by Paul Giamatti, actually.
Oh, wow.
And it starred, before Falcon and the Winter Soldier fame, Wyatt Russell, son of Kurt Russell, and Goldie Hawn, playing sort of the main character of the show, a guy named Dud, who is a little bit of like a millennial take on the dude from Big Lebowski.
Oh, okay.
And Brett Jennings, who, if you don't know who Brett Jennings is, just Google his name. You know who he is. He's that guy. He's a guy who's in everything.
Okay.
And Sonia Cassidy, who's now, kind of made a bigger career for herself since then, playing Liz, Dud's sister. The show is sort of organized into these defining, like, mythological mysteries. Most of them have to do with this ancient, quote unquote, Order of the Lynx. It's not much different from like your typical Elks Lodge or like your typical, kind of place, like club where people in their 40s and 50s spend their time with their friends. But what we come to find out is that this Order of the Lynx has this long, deep, nefarious roots, like going back thousands and thousands of years. And the story kind of takes its cues from that, these sort of lower middle class, working class people who are part of this community group in Long Beach, where they live in California. But it's this surreal, magical, like one of those shows where, kind of like season 1 of True Detective, where you're not sure if supernatural things exist in the world or not. You're not sure if it's people's perception, if people are. This guy Dud plays this basically a loser who's adrift after the death of his father. He gets brought to the lodge kind of by really random, outrageous fortune. Ernie brings him in and kind of indoctrinates him into the ways that they do things. It's just this really beautiful, tender, thoughtful, like challenging show. It kind of challenges a lot of your preconceived notions about the way people live. And I've never seen a show like this that delves into the topics that it does, because what it's really looking at in this little slice of Long Beach, California, is deindustrialization, the failed promises of capitalism, like where a lot of people are being left, and like what remnants they're taking from American life and rebuilding into their own, community or their own society and their own social structures that don't really match things that their parents told them that they could expect. Like, oh, you're going to have a great wage job, and you're going to have a wife and 2.3 kids, and like it's kind of exposing a lot of the promise of the 21st century that didn't come to pass. And it's done very deftly, never over your head, never beating you over the head with like too much messaging or anything like that. It's really brilliantly done. And on top of all of that sort of social meta commentary, there's this mystery box where you're like, what the hell is going on with this lodge? What is going on with these catacombs that are like built into it? it's incredible. And again, hate to say it, but you don't get resolution.
You
but,
don't get
yeah,
closure. I was going to ask about that, but was this set in present day?
present day.
It
Yeah,
was. Okay, all right. This sounds very interesting to me, and I guess it's
yeah.
fairly recent if Wyatt Russell was in that thing because he's not an old dude. I mean, he's only been around for.
This was his breakout. I think he was incredible in this.
Would you
And
say the year was on Lodge 49?
2018 and 2019?
Okay,
were
so
the two
yeah, it
seasons.
was really recent. Okay.
Yeah.
I will have to look these up, man. You're giving me all this homework, DQ. Damn it. We're supposed to
I
do
would say
that, man.
Lodge 49 is probably of these shows, because my number one is a very, very specific taste, and I'm sure we'll get to it. My number one is like you kind of got to
Same
be
here.
a
Mine's
person that's
pretty specific, yeah.
But if I could tell anybody to walk away from listening to this podcast and pop something on, I would say go into Hulu, pop on into the AMC vertical and watch Lodge 49. That
Okay.
would be my biggest recommend out of all these shows.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. So here's another comedy. So you got all the like hard hitting dramas over there, and I'm over here like this idiot. This 30-minute comedy.
No,
like,
man, we're mixing it up. We're
uh,
mixing it up. We balance each other out.
like dick humor or whatever. But you mentioned Stars earlier with Boss, and there was a show on Stars that I actually rewatched last year for a podcast that I went on, and I watched it in its initial run. It's
I
a
know
show.
where you're going.
It's a show called Party Down, man.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
Hell
dude.
yeah.
I mean,
Fuck yeah.
they're talking about a reunion for Party Down, and that would be a
Yeah.
dream come true. But so many actors that at the time, we really didn't know who they were unless we were like
Right.
into like the indie stand-up comic scene. But I mean, Adam Scott, Ken Marino, Jane Lynch, Martin Starr, Lizzie Kaplan. Dude, I'm in love with her. She's the best.
Incredible.
Megan Mullally was on the show, who later, broke big with Will and Grace.
Jane Lynch.
Jane Lynch, yeah. Jennifer Coolidge, Stifler's mom, is on this show for one
Yep.
season. Just so many characters up and down the call sheet on this show, and so many cool cameos in this show too.
Right.
And there were Paul Rudd was a creator on the show, so he was one of the writers of the pilot, and it was kind of his idea, the show initially, with another writer named Rob Thomas, and they came up with this concept. And you mentioned kind of with Lodge 49 coming along at the right time. And I've been in restaurants my whole life, and I did have a small run where I worked for a catering company where we like catered weddings and like banquets and stuff like that. So it really did come along at a time when it like really, really spoke to me. Like it would be very similar if you were in a like 9 to 5 office gig and you were really into the office. Like that's
Right.
what this show did for me, just because that was my setting. So all the jokes they made, all the stuff they ran into, all the different characters they would encounter, like customers, so to speak. Like I saw all those types of personalities. I got all of those jokes. And this is a show that I will absolutely rewatch anytime. Like if it's on, it will play it, and I just can't turn it off because it's hilarious. And J.K. Simmons cameo on the show is one of the best cameos in the history of TV. He plays
incredible.
this. He plays this
Two
really
times.
this
He
like
comes to. He's
Yeah,
like
dude.
recurring. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, dude. He plays this really just like prick dickhead like Hollywood producer or
Hollywood
whatever.
dude. Yeah,
And
yeah,
he's
producer.
So like just YouTube J.K. Simmons on Party Down is like the best character.
They wrote for him. They wrote that part for him so well. Like,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
him to just like sink his teeth into that. Yeah.
Yeah, just do his thing, man. Did you watch this initially in its run, or you saw it later?
I caught it in the middle of its second season, which again, this was a show that was doomed to only 2 seasons.
Yeah.
The only thing that kept this off my list, I'll tell you, is the fact that I discounted it on a technicality, because I've been told, or I've heard or read, that it's been renewed for a new season, like a la.
Ooh.
Yeah, like kind of like Arrested Development was.
I think it's like a revival. I thought it was just like a reunion thing, like a one-time thing. I didn't know they were going to do like a new show.
That's how they all start now. Like
Okay,
this
all
is
right.
this isn't a TV show, but like for instance, when they said that Netflix said that they were going to make a Wet Hot American Summer TV show, it was supposed to only be like a one-time event,
Mhm.
and then they ended up doing like 3 more seasons of it. Same thing with Arrested Development. They're
Yeah.
like 3 or 4 seasons into the very now mediocre Netflix version of Arrested Development.
Right. I guess that would be a revival as opposed to like a reunion. But I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe you're right. Maybe I didn't research that thorough enough, but I thought it was going to be like a
No,
reunion.
you might be right.
I thought it
You
was
might
going to be
right. It
like
might
a
just be
2-hour
like a
reunion thing, which I would be fucking thrilled to get. Because you got to imagine, I mean, the magic's going to be gone if you do a revival. That's what happened with Arrested Development, because I'm kind of like you. I loved AD, and I could have put that on this list too, but it was like they're on right. It's on right now basically. So
Right.
it just felt weird. But to me, Arrested Development is what we got on Fox. That's Arrested
So
Development. You know.
so you sit down in the writers' room and you tell me which direction do you go with this, right? They brought you in. You're gonna be doing punch or not punch up. You're gonna be doing writing on this revival or renewal or whatever of whatever Party Down is. Have they all are they all still like restaurant workers, or did they all become famous and then fall back down to being restaurant workers?
I think
Which way, like,
I think that would be funnier. I think it would be funnier if they were like kind of over their, success. Like they kind of
yeah,
had their 15 minutes, or however long it was,
and then done,
and
yeah,
now they're just like struggling on the back end. I
and they
think
all have to
that
come crawling back,
I
kind of
think
to Party Down.
I think that would be a good arc, or if it was just like a reunion thing, it could be something like they just, go to an event where they are, and like one of them's working the event or something like that. I don't know. It could be you could do a lot of different things, and I'm sure there are writers that are much more talented than I am, but I would be tuning in for it. That's for sure.
Heck yeah.
So Party Down's my number two, and we're up to our number ones. DQ, what do you got, man? What is the number one that you said was a very acquired show, right?
Very acquired taste, very specific to your experiences, and also, I almost didn't count this one on a technicality because it's kind of hard to say a show is, it's short lived if it ran from 2003 to 2018. But
Okay.
but this
All right.
show could have run another 15 years. It could have had another 7 seasons. It's had 7 seasons so far. It's animated, which is why it takes kind of so long. It's a very good animated show that ran on Adult Swim, half-hour black comedy, superhero, I don't know, like genre uplifting, like a genre bending type of show. That's one of my favorite, probably my favorite show of my entire life. It's called Venture Brothers. And
Venture Brothers. Huh.
Yeah, Venture Brothers is my favorite show of my life. The first time I watched Venture Brothers, I was 23 years old. I was in a Motel 6 and I was driving across the country, like trying to have like a on the road Kerouac type moment, trying to like figure out what my life was going to be.
Yeah.
And I encountered this show that was presaging a huge cultural movement or cultural shift that we're seeing right now, where every other superhero IP comic book thing that comes out, it's like, oh no, this isn't a superhero show, it's subverting a superhero show. Oh, these superheroes smoke and say fuck and they get laid, that's The Boys, Invincible, a lot of this stuff that's coming out right now, forget it. Venture Brothers is the originator
Okay.
of subverting superhero action genre tropes in an interesting, inventive way. The key people that I wrote down that I wanted to mention were Jackson Public and Doc Hammer, who was the co-creator and the co-writer, respectively. James Urbaniak, who, if you listen to podcasts, you've heard James Urbaniak's voice before, one of the most famous voice actors out there,
Uh-huh.
as Doc Venture. Patrick Warburton played
Yeah.
like iconic character, Brock Sampson, who's like the hyper competent, masculine, all muscle bound dude who is the bodyguard of the titular family, the Ventures. This is a takeoff, or it started off as sort of a send up of Johnny Quest, which I don't know if Johnny Quest was playing when you were a kid. I saw like
Yeah.
reruns of it like later on, kind of, but it's that old 70s style Hanna-Barbera serial adventure show. It started off as kind of a parody of that, and then it turned into this huge, wide ranging, like expansive universe of really inventive but funny superheroes and villains, and this deep lore that goes back centuries about like, the Guild of Calamitous Intent, and they've always been like back to the core origins of evil. It reminds me a lot of like it's like having a lot of fun with like the Shield and Hydra tropes and
Yeah.
GI Joe and Cobra. They like have a lot of fun with the imagery of that and
Okay.
appropriating it and messing with it. And for 80s and 90s kids, you watch it and it's like running a hot comb over your brain. It just feels like nice. You're like,
All right.
yeah, this is what's up. This is what's up.
All right.
Yeah.
Venture.
So Venture Brothers was canceled, unfortunately. in 2020 they announced that it was going to be canceled, and it was one of those shows that
So
generated like a
was that like a moment for you? I mean, was that? I mean,
yeah.
I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm saying like
No, no, for real.
sometimes when you hear these cancellations, it just kind of hits you.
It does, and it's funny because there's like so many things about this show where you always have to kind of consider things in the moment,
Hmm.
and people always say like, oh, they couldn't make I don't know if you've ever heard people say this, that, oh, they could never make Blazing Saddles today because of like the
Yeah,
political incorrectness. Fucking, they could not make Venture Brothers today. This is like a
yeah,
messed up show, especially some of the early seasons. It
sure.
gets it gets a pass because it has fun with a lot of marginalized communities, but the creators are members of a lot of those
So
marginalized
it's like
communities.
self aware.
It's self-awareness.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a cult show that kind of grew into
All right.
the kind of show where there's merchandising tie-ins and lots of apparel, and I have a Venture Brothers t-shirt, and I think it might end up coming back with a special, based on what I've heard from HBO Max and what I've heard
Wow,
from
that'd be cool.
social media. So I think that would be awesome. But Venture Brothers is, I'll recommend this if you like that kind of weird shit. If you're into
Sure.
like that
I mean,
that kind of,
I
yeah,
like it's all animated. You said right?
animated, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like I don't do a ton of animation like television shows like a lot of my friends do, but I mean, I like some stuff like Adventure Time and Rick and Morty and South Park,
Yeah.
and like I'll do some serialized animation shows for sure. So I'll give it a shot. I mean, it sounds awesome, and it's cool
Yeah.
that it's special to you. I feel bad that I wasn't able to add to the conversation on any of your picks though, because I hadn't heard of any of them except
I
for
wanted to,
Boss.
hey, I wanted to be like very, underground. I wanted to come with
Was
the stuff that people haven't
no, it was,
necessarily heard
and
of,
I love when guests do that. That's why I have the guests pick the topics whenever possible because I know it's going to be special to you. So that's great.
Yeah.
Now my number one man is obviously much different than what yours was, but this is and I told you I had an anecdote for my number one. This is definitely the one I'm most excited about when you pitched this topic to me, and it's also the first one I thought of, and here it is sitting at my number one. Nothing could top it for me. Is it an amazing show? I don't know that people would necessarily say it like blew them away amazing, but sometimes, and you just kind of mentioned it with Venture Brothers, things happen in your life at the exact right moment. And this show is a time capsule not only to when it took place, but to me in my life at that time. I was graduating high school and entering college when this show was popular. It only ran for what ultimately ended up being 2 seasons. It was 19 episodes. My So-Called Life.
Oh man, that's a great pick.
In
Damn, I'm
19
jealous.
in
I'm jealous of that
1993,
pick.
and
And then when you saying that made me just think of Freaks and Geeks too.
Freaks and
Fuck.
Geeks
Like,
is in my honorable mentions. That's another one. But this one even more so, just because, like I said, I was literally the kids on this show. And
yeah.
what is so funny, man, is I'm rewatching it right now. It's on Hulu, and I'm up to like episode 12. I'm going through all of them because I got invited to go on a show and talk about it, another podcast. My friend Ashley does a TV podcast called Rabbit Ears, where she talks about shows that got canceled. So I'm going to be talking about that with her. So I'm rewatching them all on Hulu. And what's funny is, as a 45-year-old dad now, because I don't know if you recall, but they had the storyline with the parents too. So you had the young kids that were in high school, going through all the issues that they were going through that high schoolers deal with. When just different things that you go through, right?
Right.
And as back then, I didn't even. It's like I didn't even remember the parents were on the show, or you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't
I
care
can't-
about
in my mind, I can't picture the parents at all.
yeah,
Like,
I didn't care about like. There's an episode where they're like getting audited by the RS, and then there's an episode
oh my
where
God,
like
I forgot about that.
the dad's like doing wallpaper because he quit his job, and like. But I don't even like remember any of that stuff. But now watching it, I'm like feel myself like really into the parent story. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I guess it's kind of genius in that way if you really think about it, because it's two completely different generations. But I am a product of the mid '90s for sure. I mean, I got the Nirvana T-shirt here on the video chat today, as you can see,
Yeah.
DQ. But I love that whole era, the grunge aesthetic, and this was really a grunge-heavy show. I mean, Jared Leto was introduced to the world in the show, and now he is what he is. Claire Danes,
He wasn't Jared Leto for the first 10 years of him being famous. He was Jordan Catalano.
that's right.
Like nobody thought of him as Jared Leto. He was Jordan Catalano.
That's
Every
right.
girl, every teenage girl was like, Jordan Catalano is in the new movie Fight Club. Like,
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it took him a while to shake off the Jordan Catalano for sure.
for sure.
But yeah, it took place near Pittsburgh, which I always thought was really cool too, like in the show, but it was obviously shot in California. But yeah, it had that real kind of gritty, grungy feel. Claire Danes, I've always been a huge fan of hers, and I was introduced to her obviously on this show. And I think that's probably why I've just kind of followed her career, and Leto's
Right.
too, to be honest. But yeah, I love this show, man. It's a time capsule. Like, don't get me wrong. If anybody goes to Hulu right now and you've never seen My So-Called Life and you start watching it, if you were not around or of age in the 90s, you're going to be like, you're going to
You had
turn it
to be
off.
there.
You're going to
You had
turn it
to be
off.
there.
Like, you're not going to be into it. So
Yeah.
it's literally like frozen in time to 1993, 1994 when it aired. So that's my number one, My So-Called Life, and I'm rewatching it right now as we speak, which is great. Well, not as we speak, because that would be rude to you. But
Can you just wait? Hang on a sec. There's a
yeah,
commercial break
this is
coming
a great
up.
scene, DQ. Give me a second. So there we go, man. So My So-Called Life rounds out my top five. I tell you what, man.
Damn, that's a really good number one.
Thanks, brother.
yeah.
Let's take a
Yeah.
quick promo break, DQ. Just take a breath, and then when we come back, what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up our list for everyone, and then we're going to give our honorable mentions, okay? Sit tight. We will be right back, guys. All right, man. Just give me 1 second here. That was good, man. I guess it's a good thing I hadn't heard of yours, but I'm also kind of surprised. All five of them.
I would have guessed. I mean, like based on the shows of yours that I've listened to, the episodes of yours that I've listened to, I would have guessed that you would have heard because you guys do a lot of streaming movies and stuff.
Yeah.
And I would have thought maybe you would have heard of Patriot because that was one that people talked about for a minute because it was part of the Amazon, Amazon launching. When they were like, oh, now Amazon's going to try to be like Netflix. It was like part of that conversation. But other than that, I'm not surprised. Like these are like kind of obscure shows.
So we're gonna do fan feedback in a minute, but over on YouTube, I got some of my patrons watching. I'm just gonna list these out to you real quick. They got Santa Clarita Diet, Ash versus Evil Dead, Firefly, Freaks and Geeks, Agent Carter, Sarah Connor Chronicles. Maybe that one got canceled because it's a tongue twister, but I remember that one. What else is on there? Chuck. Oh, Chuck's a good one. You remember him? The guy that was
Chuck,
that's
now
good.
he's in the
Shazam.
DC universe, right? He's
Yeah,
Shazam.
Shazam. Yeah, Chuck's a good one. Patrick said Breaking Bad. I don't know that was short lived. Well, no, I don't think it was short lived.
You heard the story about the way Breaking Bad started, right?
I don't
you
think
heard about
so.
that?
Tell me, I don't think
Okay,
so.
so interesting. And are your patrons hearing us right now? Talk or no?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So, and this, if you listed Breaking Bad, Patrick, you might already know this story, but Breaking Bad came out the year of the writer's strike, and it almost got canceled. In like it was almost stillborn, like it was almost canceled before it even came out. And then initially, the script called for like in the 10th episode for Jesse to get killed, for like Walt to actually, for Walt to kill Jesse, and they ran out of script because of the writer's strike. So Jesse was in all of the that short first season of 8 episodes with that first ran in the middle of the writer's strike, and people reacted to God, I can't remember the actor's name, Jesse, but they reacted to Jesse so well.
Aaron
Paul.
Aaron Paul. Yeah.
So they reacted to Aaron Paul so well that they called him up and said, "Hey, we're going to renew you for not just next season, but kind of going forward. Your character is going to be, this is going to be a two-hander instead of just the exploration of this one character.
Okay.
It's going to be about both of you,
kind of their relationship, right?
Which is what it ended up being.
Cool. Yeah. Patrick also said the Munsters. Let's see. We got Twin Peaks over there. Heroes. Jason says Venture Brothers. Great pick. So there you go.
Yeah, all right.
You got somebody on you with the Venture Bros. The Following, Prison Break. Dan Roski said Freaks and Geeks. And then Jason also said Your Honor, which is not one I'm familiar with.
Yeah, I haven't heard of Your Honor.
So thanks for speaking up over in the chat there, guys. I don't know if you guys put something on social media, but I'm going to be shouting that out here in a second, too. Let me pull that up real quick before we come back in here, DQ, so I can have that ready to go.
Sure.
I'll drop the link for you, too, man. Are you in our Facebook fan group by chance?
I'm not, no. I'm barely on Facebook, that's why.
Oh, okay. I know Jewish Dave is.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a super user on Facebook. I not so much.
I don't.
Uh,
Between me and you, I hate Facebook. But whenever I seek out fan feedback, I have a group over there that just has like basically people I know that listen to the show instead of just like random
right.
people on Twitter.
Which is
So
like the last really good thing Facebook is good for.
yeah,
Having like a group or being in groups or running a group of like-minded people who
right, right, right.
or just people who have common interests and want to talk about stuff. That's like one of the last really good uses of it. But I'm just not on there that often anymore.
All right, man, I got that ready to go. So just give me like 5 seconds, man. I'll come back in, and we'll. What I'm going to do when we come back in is I'm just going to have you wrap up your top five again. Okay? Just remind everybody. All right. All right, guys, welcome back. As I said pre-break, DQ, David, Q. It's got so many names over there, so many titles. But you know him from the Bird Road
Titles
podcast,
and titles and titles and titles, from
etc.,
what was that Game of Thrones,
etc.
right? Titles.
But you know him from Bird Road podcast, and he's a first-time guest here on the Peas, and we just had a great discussion for our top five short-lived television shows canceled too early. DQ, why don't you remind everybody of your top five again? Just go through it.
Yeah, so starting at number 5, we had The Bridge on FX that ran for a couple of seasons in 2013, 2014. Boss on Stars, which is still available over there on Stars, ran for 2 seasons as well. Patriot on Amazon, another 2-season special. Lodge 49 only ran for 2 seasons on AMC. And then Venture Brothers, which ran from 2003 to 2018, 7 seasons. And that is on Adult Swim. You can probably find it these days on like Hulu or
Okay.
HBO Max, I think. So, yeah.
Okay, cool, man. My number five was Life from 2007, an NBC show with Damian Lewis. My number 4 was Happy Endings. Number 3 was Santa Clarita Diet. My number 2 was Party Down, and my number 1 was My So-Called Life,
Mhm.
which was my life in 1994 when that show came out. So that was our top fives. Now I've got 5 honorable mentions that I was able to jot down here to round out my top 10. What about you, buddy? What didn't quite make the top 5 that you want to shout out?
I do have 5 as well. Would you like me to just kind of, like we said before,
Yeah,
lightning round?
yeah. Just kind of
Hustle
list
through
them
them?
6 through 10. Yeah.
Okay, so number 6 was a TV show that was on HBO for only 1 season. They filmed 2 seasons, but they didn't show the second one because they killed a bunch of horses. And I don't mean that in the show. In reality, they killed a bunch of horses doing the
Wow.
show. And it was a show called Luck, which was just like a David Milch, it was like a star-studded. It was going to be the next big HBO show
Hmm.
after Sopranos, and it had Dustin Hoffman. It was a TV show with Dustin Hoffman in it. It was incredible.
Interesting. Okay.
And yeah, and it was a great show. So Luck was number 6. Number 7, AMC's Into the Badlands. Just badass, awesome action, fighting, killing, murdering. One of the best action shows I've seen. Here's the one that I mentioned at the top of the show that is going to harken back to our days as kids. Liquid Television on MTV.
Yeah,
Now,
sure.
I think we think of Liquid Television as always being there when we were young, but it was
Sure.
only on for 3 seasons. There were only 27 episodes of Liquid Television.
Wow, that does feel
So-
like that was a million. Yeah.
Yeah. Number 9 would be Undone on Amazon. I don't know if you got a chance to see that. It was the same creative team that did BoJack Horseman,
Uh-huh.
but it was this very existential, kind of like breathy, thoughtful, trippy, heady kind of animated. It wasn't technically animated; it was rotoscoped. I don't know if you ever saw a Scanner Darkly with Keanu Reeves.
yeah.
But that type of animation, they call it rotoscoping.
Yeah.
And it was great. And then number 10 is a show that you guys mentioned last week, actually, Glow on Netflix.
Yeah, it's a good
which
one.
only lasted 3 seasons and was one of the best things that Netflix ever did.
It really was.
And was canceled just
Betty Gilpin,
unceremonially.
Betty Gilpin, Alison Brie. You can't go wrong, man. That was a great show.
Yep.
And Mark Maron was really good on that show too.
Yeah, he was
All
great.
right, my number 6 would have been a show called Pushing Daisies. Did you ever see that
Ooh,
one?
good show. Yeah, good show. I remember that
Yeah,
show.
that was a great show. I just remember, didn't know anything about the ratings or whatever, but I just remember being baffled that Pushing Daisies got canceled because I just loved it so much. I thought it was such a cool, like, inventive concept.
Yeah.
My number 7 would have been Firefly, which got mentioned over in our YouTube chat. That's, it's really cool because it's kind of like, let's do like a Star Wars Western type show on TV.
Yeah.
which is something now, of course, Star Wars has all their own series, but at the time it was something kind of unique, Number 8 would have been Freaks and Geeks, which we also have had
Great
mentioned
show.
a couple times. My number 9 was a show called Heroes on NBC, which was I thought a cool superhero show, but like
How long did that run?
I think it was 5 years. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
remember that's a show that started off incredibly. I didn't watch it, but I remember the line on it was that it started off incredibly strong
mhm.
and then kind of like tailed off a little bit, and
Yeah, it's a concept
people
that's
like
hard
lost
to.
interest.
Yeah, it's a concept that was hard to keep up with. I think, but
Yeah,
their whole marketing was like genius.
yeah, I
Because it
remember that.
was a whole thing with Hayden Panettiere, and it was like who will save the cheerleader? I think was the tagline or whatever.
Right.
And it was just like a really cool marketing concept, and I was really into that show, and I loved all the different abilities that they introduced, and you mentioned it earlier too with like the boys and all these shows now, but I mean at the time it wasn't really being done, at least not on
No,
TV,
not at all. Yeah.
And then my number 10, Joss Whedon might be problematic or whatever, I don't know, maybe, but the Dollhouse. Did you ever see Dollhouse on Fox?
No, what is that? I
So
don't remember that one.
Dollhouse ran for I want to say 2 seasons, but it starred Eliza Dushku as the lead, and it was like a sci-fi futuristic show where these basically like attractive females, for lack of a better way to put it, would get their memory erased, and very wealthy and well-established men or people could basically rent them, and they would have a personality or another person implanted into their mind, and they would be that person while they were being rented. Does that
My
make
God.
sense or not?
Yeah. No,
Yeah. And what happens? What happens is in the show, you know who Alan Tudyk is, right? So Alan Tudyk
Yeah.
was in it, and he works there. He's like one of the I guess equivalent of like an IT guy, basically. And he works there, and Eliza Dushku is one of the dolls, and her memory starts to kind of come back to her, and he like starts helping her on the inside. And so she starts to kind of unravel this mystery about why they're there and what their deal is, and she's trying to like expose the agency. So it was
Wow,
really
that one
good.
completely flew under my radar. I did not
Yeah.
know about that, and especially considering Joss Whedon was, I would imagine, the showrunner.
Yep.
He the
Mhm.
creator. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting because
Yeah,
I did
Dollhouse.
follow his career. I was into all his stuff when I was younger, and this sounds like something I just maybe wasn't paying attention at that moment, and
Yeah.
it just flew under my radar.
I want to say it was 2 seasons, but it was really stylized. It was really cool. It was on Fox, so it was a little tame, probably. I mean, I feel like it
Right.
would have been a lot better if it had been on like HBO or something. But
Yeah,
yeah, Dollhouse. I say check it out if you're into sci-fi, kind of like futuristic story, kind of like Matrix type stuff. It was really cool in that way. So. There you go. So that's would round out our favorite shows that were short-lived. Real quick, because we are running along, man, but I want to head over to Facebook, buddy, and just shout out some fans over in the old suggestion box to see what they have to say, DQ, and see if you're familiar with any of these. I just said, what are some of your favorite short-lived or canceled too soon TV shows? Joey DiCarlo from So Wizard says Space Above and Beyond.
I don't know that one.
I don't either.
Need a bit more.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
know what that one was.
Yeah, he's a sci-fi dude, though, so I'm not surprised. Dan Truly said, Pushing Daisies. I am not okay with this, which is a recent one, I think.
I'm not okay with this. Got canceled. Damn. Thanks a lot, Dan, for the bad news. I really like
Apparently.
that show.
Yeah,
Damn.
that's a new show,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Brad from the Cinema Guys also said Space of Above and Beyond, so I guess I'm going to have to look that one up. And then he says Earth 2 and Almost Human. Also shows I'm not familiar with. Melissa from Brook Reading says 2 of mine. She says Firefly and My So-Called Life.
Firefly is, I would say, probably if that question that you asked was sent out as like a survey monkey to 1 million Americans, I think Firefly would probably end up being like right there at the top.
Yeah. I mean, they did the Serenity movie and everything.
People loved it.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Christianity says Now and Again, Viper, and Limitless. Limitless was a show I never watched, but I did love the movie with Bradley Cooper. I thought it was a really cool concept.
Yeah, how did they turn that into a show, I wonder?
I don't know.
I guess the same premise and just like exploring that world where people can be super world dominating geniuses. With
Yeah, most likely. Feel good stuff.
I always felt like that the premise of that movie, because I didn't really, I think I was vaguely aware that it was a show, but I always thought that premise had like a real scalability problem where it was like there's going to be a point where everybody on the planet is limitless, and
Yeah.
like what then? You
Yeah.
know, I was like,
There's
how
got to
do
be
you
a new
play that
limit.
out?
Yeah, there's got to be a
Yeah.
new limit at some point. Let's see. Patron Josh Ragland says Trial and Error, Freaks and Geeks, Happy Endings, and the Muppets. Oh, that's sweet.
Muppets.
Yeah.
How long did the Muppets run? I wonder. Was that short lived?
Yeah, I'd say so. Well, I'd say so because they should be on forever. So if it got
Well, yeah,
canceled,
no,
it was
and also
short-lived.
the TV shows work differently. Like for instance, recently I was browsing through Hulu, and with my daughter, who's age appropriate for this, I started watching Thundercats, right from
Mhm.
from our childhood. Thundercats only went. I might get this wrong, so if you're out there listening, keep me honest, and let me know if I got it wrong. But it was something like 2 seasons, but like 150 episodes. It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like, how do you even do 2 seasons,
What?
150 episodes?
Holy
Yeah,
Lord.
but they did things differently back then. Like the
Yeah,
partitions between seasons were different, and also with animated,
right.
with animated stuff, it was just like crank it out.
Doug from Good Times, Great Movies shouted out Push Nevada, a show I've heard of, but I never saw.
Oh, I did see the first few episodes of that. I thought it was good. It was a
Uh,
while ago though. Yeah.
my buddy Kevin said Better Off Ted, which is a show that I'm also familiar with, but I didn't see it.
Mhm.
Let's see. Patron and friend of the show, Michael Hill, says Pushing Daisies, Minority Report, Almost Human, Firefly, and Glow. He's a big TV guy, so interesting that
Yeah.
those are his picks. I'm not going to be able to go through all these. Let me just, I can take this part out, but let me scan through and find the patrons here at least. All right. John Campbell says Titus. You remember Christopher
Oh, I
Titus had
remember
his own
Titus.
show? Yeah.
That
was-
didn't last very long, but it was good. I feel like it lost a lot of its energy when My Name is Earl came out. I think the same people that were into Titus were into My Name is Earl.
Yeah, true.
And like I think it just kind of stole its thunder a little bit.
Patron and friend of the show, Paul from the Countdown, with a bunch of the crying, laughing emoji faces, says Game of Thrones. I think he just wanted that to go on forever. I guess.
Damn good answer.
Yeah. Let's see. Joey Austin says Freaks and Geeks, Journeyman, and he says you're going to have to trust me because it's underseen. Parker Lewis Can't Lose. Andy Barker.
Oh, damn, that's a deep pull. Parker Lewis Can't Lose.
Parker Lewis
That
Can't
was
Lose.
that was a drafting off of the energy of oh, come on, the
I don't know this one, so you'll have to tell me.
the movie. I can't believe that I'm like blanking right now, but
Give me the premise.
the
Maybe
premise is the kid's last. He pretends that he's sick. He stays home from school. Him and Cameron go to downtown Chicago with the girlfriend.
Oh, Ferris Bueller?
Ferris Bueller, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what Parker Lewis was. It was a vehicle to take the popularity of the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off and turn it into a TV show. That's what Parker Lewis can, and I loved it when I was like
Okay.
9-10 years old. I was
Yeah,
like, I thought
you
it was
would
so
think
cool.
that would work. Yeah. Yeah. He also said Andy Barker, PI, Everything Sucks from Netflix, and Z-Rock.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. Dan Roski, top tier patron of the show, says Free Radio, Undeclared, Pitch.
Undeclared, yeah.
Hey, my guy says Life with Damian Lewis.
There you go.
Dan Roski, he knows me. I can't believe somebody else watched it, though. I'm so impressed that Dan watched that. He also says Sledgehammer, Crashing.
Crashing was good. I
Yeah.
like Crashing.
And then he said Luck, which is, I don't know that I know Luck. I was trying
That's
to.
that was one of my honorable mentions. Was
Oh, that's the
Luck.
one you were talking about. Oh, okay, that's right.
Yeah,
That's
where they
right.
killed a bunch of horses.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see. And then we'll wrap up on Joe Ketchum. He's always commenting. Thank you so much, Joe. He says Cop Rock, The Clerks animated series, Dollhouse. There you go. Better Off Ted and Run. Better Off Ted got actually quite a few here. Did you know
Much
Better
res-
Off? Do you know Better Off
Yeah.
Ted? I don't know if I
Yeah,
know that one.
but much respect to the Clerks animated show. Like that's a great pull.
Yeah,
that
that's
was a
good.
show that I probably laughed at more than anything from the years like I don't know 1999 through like 2002. That and like Strangers with Candy. I would say those are like the two shows that I laughed at more than anything in my life. It was hilarious.
That's good
Great
stuff,
pull.
man. All right, so look, dude, DQ, I appreciate it, man. You know, I don't get to really dive into TV very often. You know, I do probably 80% of my countdowns are movies. So it's always
Yeah.
cool when I get to kind of, especially with this kind of list where it's like nostalgic and I kind of just reminisce, you know? So,
Yeah.
thanks so much for pitching it, man. And I had a lot of fun doing it. Thanks for being here. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find Bird Road and find you and Jewish Dave if they want to look you guys up?
Yeah, sure. First thing, Gerald, thanks for having me on. It was awesome. I love talking about this kind of stuff. I don't usually get to talk about more uplifting and interesting stuff like this.
Sure.
Instead, it tends to be like less uplifting stuff, and you can listen to that less uplifting stuff on Bird Road Podcast, on Apple Podcasts, and anywhere that podcasts are found. We are also at birdroadpodcast.com. We have like all the affiliate links or whatever, all the link tree or whatever to send you to whatever your podcast player is. And we're on Instagram and Twitter at Bird Road Podcast. So check us out.
Awesome. Yeah, guys, I'll put everything in the show notes as well. Make sure you click down there, give them a follow, and listen to some of those eps. And once again, man, I really appreciate you being here, okay?
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, guys, we will be back next week. We will have another top 5 and another P on the pod. Everybody take care. All right, man, you can stop recording, brother.
All right. This takes a little bit to export.
Yeah, it's all good, man.
So, that's the one drawback of the Rodecaster is that it takes it's a little bit of a pain in the butt to export.
So you got the Rodecaster Pro?
Yeah.
Because I was considering.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. I didn't know if that was something different or whatever. That's why I was asking. I'm not too familiar with it, but I was looking at it and I was thinking about getting it, but I don't know. Yeah, that's the one I was looking at too. I'm just kind of doing my thing out here, so whatever. I guess maybe one of these days I'll get one.
It's cool. I mean, it's worth it. I originally bought it because I had this idea that, well, it wasn't an idea. We were doing it. We were doing a lot of live shows where I would plug in 5 mics and have a bunch of people sitting around, cycling in and out, like politicians and candidates and people, activists, and everybody sitting around, and everybody had their own mic. And then pandemic, no more need for it.
Right.
No more sitting around all in a studio or in a bar or whatever.
Right.
So yeah,
makes sense.
Just being used for this now.
Well, yeah, but I mean, one of these days, hopefully, we'll get back to that. So
yeah, for sure.
And like I said, I was thinking about getting it, but it's just been me in my garage, so I'll just hold off. But well, dude, this is a lot of fun, man. I appreciate you being here for it.
Thank you for having me.
I'm gonna end the stream over on YouTube, but just drop me. I'll drop my email address. Well, no, you have it, right? Because
I have your email.
Yeah.
As soon as this export finishes, I'll shoot it over to you. It might be in the morning because it takes an hour and a half. So
wow, really? It takes that long?
I think it's a problem with my setup. Wow. Don't let me reflect badly on the Rodecaster.
You weren't kidding.
I think it's an issue with my setup. It's not endemic to Rodecaster. I think that I use this CalDigit thing to process a lot of my stuff, and I think that it slows things down a lot sometimes. So when I'm file transferring, and I think that's the culprit. But I'll get it to you.
It's cool, man. It's not urgent, so just whenever you can, brother.
Cool, man.
All right, man. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, talk soon, man. Thanks.
All right, brother.